When we started writing our thoughts down on paper, it opened up endless possibilities. Ideas could grow beyond the borders of the mind, and it changed the world. Somewhere along the way, we lost touch with paper, distracted by devices made for every purpose except thinking and focus. On edge, waiting for the next notification. But what if new technology didn't pull us away from paper, but brought us closer to it? Listen. That's not paper. It's the sound of the new Remarkable Paper Pro, rewriting the future. A paper tablet with a true color ink display, gentle reading light, and unheard of tactility, with digital features for taking notes, thinking, and organizing, without any distractions. Paper is about to change the world again. Get your paper tablet at remarkable.com today.
We're 5-1. It feels good. We're going to go over that win against Utah. We're going to preview this 9 a.m. Arizona time kickoff against Cincinnati. We're going to do our Todd of the week, and we're going to do Sun Devil signs. And all of that is brought to you by Charlie Hustle Clothing Company, a vintage-inspired clothing company based out of Kansas City, specializes in collegiate and hometown apparel, including Arizona State. Charlie Hustle loves the Big 12 Conference and wants every Big 12 fan to be the best dressed this season with their wide selection of officially licensed collegiate apparel. You can actually jump on there and use the code 101215. That's TEN, the number 12, the number 15, for 15% off all non-sale items. With more than 30 schools to choose from, including all 16 Big 12 schools, they've got you covered with all of your collegiate apparel needs. They've got a great, the weather's cooling off a little bit. It's not quite hoodie weather yet for Arizona State fans. They've got a great gold hoodie in there that I highly recommend. You can shop today, www.charliehustle.com, and use the promo code 101215 for 15% off all non-sale items. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. All right, let's get into it. The win over Utah. All right, so let's get into this. Arizona State 27, Utah 19. Friday night. I typically hate Friday night games. One of the big reasons is I cover high school football. I've run Arizona varsity as part of the Rivals Network since 2015. I've covered high school football in the state of Arizona since 2012. Friday nights are for high school football, especially when you're wanting to have recruits out to your game. And you're on the verge of doing something special. You want recruits in attendance. You really do. Saturdays are for college football. However, even I have to admit that Arizona State meeting the moment on a Friday when there's no other games on was absolutely best case scenario. Now, I had divided attention, but I was still tuned in. This win, especially being down 6-0, giving up a field goal on Utah's first drive, throwing an interception to a defensive tackle, and then getting down 6-0, a lot of nerves surrounding that. And just like against Texas Tech, where Arizona State came up on the losing end, you give up 2 scoring drives right away. And then for the most part, for the rest of the game, you dominate that contest. But when you hold a team to 6-0, it's a lot different than 14-0. Arizona State outscores Utah in the final 50 minutes of this game by a score of 27-13. And it was really the Cam Skattebo show. We'll get into a little bit of everybody's contributions, but I have to give a shout out to Cam Skattebo. He's been getting Heisman buzz. He absolutely deserves it. He's been getting national attention all over the place. He absolutely deserves it. He has been the cornerstone, the rock of this Arizona State team. And he had 199 total yards from the running back position. This is the most total yardage a running back has had against Utah since the 2019 Pac-12 championship game when CJ Verdell rushed for over 200 yards against a defense that I believe up until that point hadn't given up a 100-yard rusher all season long. So Cam Skattebo, absolute MVP of this game. We're not going to pretend like anybody else is. He got stronger as the game went on. He's managed to stay healthy, the way that he's reshaped his body, the way that he's taken being a pass blocker seriously, the way that he's helped out as a receiver. All of it has just been absolutely incredible. He deserves a ton of credit. Sam Leavitt deserves a lot of credit too, even though he got knocked out of this game and now he's potentially out for 2 to 4 weeks. And we'll get into Jeff Sims and all of that coming up in a moment. But Sam Leavitt deserves a ton of credit for his poise, for the way that he ran, for improving his accuracy, for being steadfast in the face of adversity, throwing an early interception, dealing with pressure from Utah's defensive front. Very, very impressive performance from Sam Leavitt, and just a great performance overall from this offense. You might look at it and say 27 points, what's the big deal? But this is against Utah. This is against a team that beat Arizona State 55-3 last year. And that was without Cam Rising. That was with Bryson Barnes at quarterback. And so, just an incredible year-to-year improvement for Arizona State to move to 5-1, to move to 2-1 in conference, to conceivably, had the beginning of the Texas Tech game not been so disastrous, be 6-0. That's within reach. And when you start thinking about that, you start looking at the rest of the schedule and wondering, why not us? Why couldn't we repeat this? Why couldn't we do it again? Why couldn't we shoot for double-digit wins? And to have hope as a Sun Devil fan is just such a refreshing. It's very different because the 2020 season didn't get completed. Arizona State blew it in the first week against USC, and then the season ended up the way it did. 70-7 was nice, but a 4-game season, that's not going to cut it. 2021 was just a complete disappointment. 2022 was, it was miserable, losing to Eastern Michigan, it being very, very obvious that Arizona State didn't have what it took under Herm Edwards at that point. To have to transition to Sean Aguano, there was definitely some exciting moments, but it wasn't hope for a special season. And so, to move into 2023 and to go 3-9, but to still know that you were probably 3 or 4 plays away from a 6-6, perhaps even a 7-5 season, you went into this season with hope to get back to bowl eligibility. And here they are with 6 chances to win 1 game. 6 chances to win 1 game to get to that point. Arizona State is playing with house money at this point. They've beaten the Las Vegas point total spread or the over-under for wins already. And, getting a win over ranked Utah on a Friday night with over 1 million people watching is just fantastic for this program. Typically, I don't care about national attention all that much, but it does help the profile of your players who are doing positive things in the era of NIL. Normally, in the previous era of college football, I was always confused as to why teams wanted national recognition, national attention. They really should, in my opinion, have been focused locally, whether that's who they leak stories to, whether that's, the community that they pay attention to, the people they try to engage with. But in the era of NIL, it doesn't help to have some national notoriety, especially when all of the publicity for Arizona State over the last few years has had to do with the NCAA investigation, misconceptions about Herm, the way he was fired, all of those things. And, to watch Herm be on ESPN, to watch Antonio Pierce be head coach of the Raiders, to watch, Ray Anderson get to teach 1 class and still get his salary. Meanwhile, the football team was going through hell, and you had players being drafted into the NFL who started at ASU and moved on to elevate themselves elsewhere. It's been a lot of misery. And so you have to take a moment to really be grateful for where Arizona State is at. The results are nice, but the momentum and the feeling that things are possible again is really the thing that you have to be most grateful for. And it's been an absolute blast. We did an emergency spaces after the win over Utah. That went for 3 hours. Demario Richard was in there praising Cam Skattebo. You had offensive lineman Ben Coleman jump in and give his take, and it just seemed like everybody was having an absolute blast. You get that extra day of preparation and you're on to Cincinnati with the opportunity to be bowl eligible. And that's really all you want as a fan, is an opportunity. Nobody at Arizona State at this point in time is asking for national championship. But the crazy thing is Arizona State is currently in the mix. They are in the mix. We are halfway through the season, and the college football playoff isn't completely out of question. Who would have thought that we would be in this position? We talked a lot about the possibility that if everything went right for Arizona State, they could start the season 4-0. But once they got into the heart of Big 12 competition, would they gas out like last year when they were relatively competitive outside of 3 of the final 4 games where they just got the doors blown off them? The offensive line is still relatively healthy. The wide receivers have still kind of been an untapped resource. There have been injuries at running back, but Cam Skattebo has been able to carry the load. There's some issues on special teams, but the defense has been incredibly solid. They survived. They survived missing 2 players due to targeting calls the previous week, and were able to put together an incredible defensive performance. Gave up points in every single quarter to Utah, but at the end of the day, they only gave up 1 touchdown. Right? 4 field goals and 1 touchdown. That's going to get the job done. Utah actually scored more times, I believe, than Arizona State did. And Arizona State still got an 8-point win. And this is a team you just have to be really, really proud of. After the game, you saw Cam Skattebo carrying Kenny Dillingham. You saw Kenny Dillingham's post-game celebration, where he talked about the fact that it was crazy that he was out there with students who would rush the field because he used to be one of those students. Then he just bounced up and down and disappeared into the crowd. That scene alone got so much national attention. It was so much fun to be an Arizona State football fan on Friday night. I hope everybody really enjoyed a stress-free, joyful Saturday with their family, knowing that Arizona State had beaten expectations, and that we're on to the second half of the season with nothing but house money. Now, to get into some of the storylines and details from this game, thing number 1, Cam Rising. I have a lot of respect for Cam Rising. His older brother Tyson Rising played for Arizona State. I was there covering the team when Cam Rising came in for a visit. I don't think he was trying to go to ASU, but it was an option for him, and his brother was there. I've watched his college career. He battled through injury. I think he missed his senior year of high school, got hurt as a redshirt out at Texas, and then has battled injuries his entire time at Utah. I was excited for him to get back on the field. He immediately got rolled up, immediately hurt his right ankle. And then, the finger stuff, that didn't even matter. He couldn't get a push off. And Arizona State was able to take advantage of the fact that he had nothing. The throwing is a full body thing. And they were able to intercept Cam Rising. He went 16 for 37 and unfortunately has been ruled out for the rest of this season. Could be the end of his college career altogether. And if that is the case, he deserves a ton of praise for what he was able to do to elevate that Utah program to ultimately end up at the dissolution of the Pac-12 as the top team in the Pac-12 South, with a stranglehold over the LA teams. And so I have a lot of respect for Cam Rising and what he's been able to accomplish. Do I think he should come back for year 8? No. But if his financial, if he is afforded the option, and he is able to, make it work financially, to go to the NFL, he should. But if the best financial option for him is to take that 8th year and come back, I think it should probably be somewhere else. I think Utah should turn this thing over to Isaac Wilson or Heward or whoever else they have on the team. But I do think that Cam Rising left his imprint on Utah, and there'll be a lot of what ifs surrounding his legacy. But at the same time, I think there's going to be a lot of gratitude as well. Arizona State handled Micah Bernard or Mekhi Bernard, or however you pronounce it. My oldest son is named Micah. I'm assuming, based on the spelling is Micah, but I heard the announcers call him Mekhi the entire time. 21 carries for 129 yards. This is a 23, 24-year-old running back. He's tough. He's had a lot of college football experience. He plays behind a fantastic offensive line. For Arizona State to give up 129 yards rushing and to come out on top in this game, that's enormous. You don't typically give up over 100 yards rushing to a single player and find yourself on the winning end of a football game. And then shout out to Dorian Singer, former, Phoenix Pinnacle product, who went to University of Arizona as a walk-on, ended up out at USC, buried on the depth chart, has moved over to Utah and has become their leading receiver. It was fun to see him back in the Valley, presumably playing in front of some friends and family on a Friday night, just like he used to. So, I think this Utah team is still good. I think they'll still do some damage in the Big 12. They haven't really had to face too many Big 12 teams yet. It's mostly been Pac-12 cast-offs, and they've lost to Arizona and Arizona State. But as far as Arizona State University, again, Sam Leavitt took a vicious hit. He's knocked out for a month. We'll get into the Jeff Sims thing here in a moment, but I do want to praise him for his performance in this game. It was gutsy. They probably don't win without his running ability. His running ability has been fantastic. Still not getting the receivers involved the way that I would like, but didn't even really have an opportunity to in the second half, as I don't think he was going to do much throwing at all with his right side taking a massive, massive hit. For him to return and take the kneel down right before halftime, I thought left the stadium in great spirits. I thought that was a really underrated moment of this Arizona State win over Utah, that Sam Leavitt went to the locker room, that he came back out and he took that knee so that everybody in the stadium, the 40 plus thousand people that were in the stadium, could go into halftime feeling some semblance of hope in a 13-9 game at that point with ASU having the lead. Again, I don't know what else to say about Cam Skattebo. He is he's the heart of this team. He's the face of this team. He's the muscle of this team, and just an awesome performance from him to get 199 total yards. Again, that has not been done in 5 years against a very talented Utah defense. And speaking of defense, Caleb McCullough stepped in, 12 tackles, 6 solo, 1.5 for a loss, and 2 interceptions. And, this is somebody who has been at Arizona State since 2020, since the 4-game season in 2020. He probably had a lot more opportunities to play elsewhere, to be honest. He saw the field quite a bit, had 52 total tackles last year. He has to be thinking to himself, I'm going into my redshirt senior year, and I'm not starting. That's tough. He could have taken every opportunity to go elsewhere, but as Kenny Dillingham said, he wants to be a Sun Devil, and he comes through with one of the most memorable performances. People are going to remember Caleb McCullough as a Sun Devil now. He had 2 interceptions in this game. He had 1 in his career prior to this. The 12 tackles in a game is more than his first 3 years on the roster combined. So Caleb McCullough deserves a ton of praise for his effort against Utah and the fact that it came against a ranked team, such a high-profile team. And now you realize, wow, Arizona State's got so much depth at linebacker, which has really been their best position all season long. A few other things from this game: Miles Rouser getting penalized for punching at the ball. Very funny. I know people are probably sick of Miles Rouser getting personal foul flags. That's not really one that affected the outcome of the game. They were still kind of close to the end zone. And, at this point, people are just kind of looking for reasons to flag him. So he needs to be careful. I probably a thing that Arizona State needs to figure out is kicking and punting. Canyon Floyd, 3 punts and the longest was 38 yards. That's not necessarily acceptable. And then ASU plays 3 different kickers, right? Parker Lewis is on kickoff, and then they rotate who kicks extra points and field goals between Ian Hershey and Karsten Kiefer. Karsten Kiefer missed an extra point early in the game. They moved to Ian Hershey. To win this game without having to make any field goals was a really big deal for Arizona State, because that's been kind of an issue for Arizona State this year. And then Keith Abney with an interception. I absolutely love the way that he's been playing in coverage all year long. And then Prince Dorba, he was able to get into the backfield. Zach Swanson and Jeff Clark as well. A lot of these guys are making names for themselves. It's not a defense full of superstars, but if everybody understands Coach Ward's scheme and everybody's doing what they're supposed to, they're going to continue to win games. And they're in a position right now where if they win half their games the rest of the way, we're talking about an 8-win season. And they're going to have a lot more opportunities to win in front of a home crowd. After this Cincinnati game and after the bye week where they'll go play Oklahoma State, you have UCF and you have BYU at home. Even winning those 2 games would put Arizona State in an incredible position. The 2 of the final 4 are at home. They will play at Cincinnati at 9 a.m. We're going to get into that in a moment. Oklahoma State, they're down this year, and that was a winnable game last year as well. That's going to be very interesting with 2 weeks to prepare. The Kansas State in November one is one that a lot of people have circled as a game that they were afraid of just because of the weather, just because of Corvallis PTSD of having to go up to the Northwest in November, and Arizona State never really playing well. But with Arizona State being primarily a running team, I think I have less fear of the weather than I have in years past. And then to finish off that game on November 30th, I'll be in town for the game in Tucson at Arizona. This is shaping up to have the potential to be a really special season. I would love for somebody to explain to me why 5-1 on the back half isn't feasible. It could absolutely happen. But they're going to have to face some really tough teams in order to make that work. One that was ranked before the season started, one that was in the college football playoff 3 years ago, two that are ranked right now, and then your hated rivals. So it's going to be a very fun back half of the season, and they might be doing that without Sam Leavitt, the redshirt freshman, who with his legs has propelled Arizona State to this 5-1 record. Now, backup quarterback in this situation is Jeff Sims, and there is a lot of nervousness around Jeff Sims, who has played a lot of games in his college football career, only has 3 300-yard passing games, really had the worst possible performance that you could have on a national stage against Colorado last year after being named the starter at Nebraska. But he's a very impressive guy, 6'3", 215, can run like the wind. Matt Rule called him an NFL guy. Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech called him an NFL guy. Kenny Dillingham even called him an NFL guy before this season. I don't have that much confidence in Jeff Sims' arm, and I would love to see Arizona State go out against Cincinnati and just run, because, I don't think the forward pass is going to be our best friend in a Jeff Sims run offense, but I could be wrong. And again, I think everybody who listens to this, everybody who joins in on Sun Devil Spaces every week understands that I am a Trenton Bourguet fan. He has been on this team since 2019. And if you go back 49 games, Trenton Bourguet has the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 8 total passing yardage games over the last 49. So in the event that Jeff Sims can't get it done in Sam Leavitt's absence, you do have an option. And it's a good option in Trenton Bourguet. He's not somebody, I know in this Marcus Arroyo offense, they like the quarterback to be able to move. He's not going to fulfill that desire of the offensive coordinator, but he can sling it. He can sling it all over the field. He has a very, very good understanding of where the receivers are going to be and when and how to get them involved. He's great at it. And if he gets an opportunity, I certainly believe that he'll be ready. So let's get into the upcoming game against University of Cincinnati. Okay, so Cincinnati, you might remember Luke Fickell, college football playoff, Sauce Gardner, Desmond Ridder. They've been getting a ton of great publicity lately with the emergence of the Kelsey brothers, because Jason and Travis both attended Cincinnati. They gave us Brian Kelly, before he was at Notre Dame, he was at Cincinnati, and they have a really great history as a university when it comes to football, basketball as well. The Danny Fortson and many others has actually been a great university as far as athletics goes, and they are 1 year ahead of us as far as their inclusion into the Big 12. So they worked their way up into major conference college football and basketball. You definitely have to respect them for that. Luke Fickell left to take the Wisconsin job. It remains to be seen if he is ultimately angling to get himself back to Ohio State. We'll see how fans handle Ryan Day. I'm sure if they lose to Michigan this year, the fans will run that man out of town and be looking for the next person to take over. And, there are plenty of guys in college football with Ohio State ties that are high-level coaches, whether it's Marcus Freeman or Luke Fickell. But I've gone off on a tangent. If you want regular college football coverage, subscribe to the College Football Apostles on Unafraid Show. But I'm here to talk about Arizona State, and Cincinnati is their opponent at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. local time this Saturday. And the last time Arizona State played at 9 a.m. Arizona time was against Northwestern. If you were alive for that game, congratulations. You're old like me. I think you can look up highlights from that game on YouTube, namely the Dale Robinson hit on Brent Bassinet is definitely the thing you're going to want to look for. But, it's going to be wild to have a 9 a.m. kickoff. Hopefully, people are doing some breakfast tailgating with some mimosas and some chilaquiles and whatever else is available to you. I'm excited. I'm out on the East Coast. It's going to be a noon kickoff for me, so I get to go to my daughter's softball game, come home, settle in for some college football, and I'm very, very excited about this game in particular. I do not think Cincinnati is a very good team. They've had some positive results this year. We're going to go through their schedule together right now, and I'll give you some context as to how they got to be 4-2. You should have a healthy fear of Cincinnati for no other reason than it's a road game. And this is a team that typically starts fast. They taper off, but they've got a lot of great scripted series early in games. And that has, the one time Arizona State's had problems, was Texas Tech getting out to a 14-0 lead. Again, that's Arizona State shooting themselves in the foot. But you make mistakes on the road. It's really what you do. When you're Arizona State historically. So they opened the season with a win over Towson. That's a non-major conference. So you can ignore that, but they did give up 20 points in a game against Towson. So that's something that is notable. They got out to a huge lead against Pitt at home. And then Eli Holstein, who is a redshirt freshman, fantastic quarterback, Alabama transfer. He really took hold of that game for Pitt, brought them back. They got a 28-27 win over Cincinnati. That was Cincinnati's first loss of the season. It came at home. Then Cincinnati traveled to Miami of Ohio. So their third game of the season was a lot like Arizona State's in that they were playing a non-major conference opponent, and they were doing it on the road. So Miami of Ohio, they don't really run the ball, didn't have success running the ball against Cincinnati. Not that you can't run the ball against Cincinnati, but Miami of Ohio didn't really try. But they did throw for almost 350 yards, something that Arizona State is not going to do. But that's when you started to notice that Cincinnati plays some bend but don't break defense. And Miami of Ohio ended up only getting 16 points in that game. That was Cincinnati's second win of the season to move to 2-1. And then Cincinnati took on who I told you was going to be the worst team in the Big 12 this season in Houston. And it was a rout. It was 34-0. That was a home game for Cincinnati, their second home game of the season. And then since then, Cincinnati has had 2 road games. They got off to a big lead against Texas Tech, lost that lead, ended up losing that game 44-41. Taj Boyd ran all over them. Morton threw all over them. Cincinnati's defense did not look good in that game. And then last week, they went down to Orlando where UCF started a 17-year-old quarterback. Cincinnati got out to a 10-0 lead and then just held on for dear life. Ended up winning this game 19-13. UCF had an opportunity to tie, had an opportunity to win, didn't take it. And Cincinnati could look at this game and they can say, well, look, our defense was good. There's context to it though. Houston doesn't really have any quarterback play. UCF started a 17-year-old, then alternated between him and KJ Jefferson, who doesn't really throw. And that's kind of the situation that Arizona State's probably going to be in with Jeff Sims. So maybe Cincinnati has kind of a leg up as far as experience against running quarterbacks. But we'll see. This is going to be their only third opportunity to play at home after 2 weeks on the road, and a bye week in between. So it's been a while for Cincinnati since they've had a home game. I'm sure they're going to be really excited for this. It's the opportunity for Scott Satterfield, who was 5-8 in his last 13, to move to 5-2 on the season. Scott Satterfield is not somebody who Cincinnati fans have been overly impressed with. And of course, one of the big reasons for that is they just came off a college football playoff experience with Luke Fickell. So the standards are certainly heightened. And Scott Satterfield had a lot of success at App State, but he was kind of middling at Louisville. They were not sad to see him go. him taking over this Cincinnati program has had mixed results. Again, 5-8 in his last 13, does not have a reputation for being the best situational coach, but here is what he has to work with on this roster. So I'm going to give you a little breakdown of, I watched all their games except for the Tosin game. And I'm going to give you a breakdown of some of the players that I feel like you're really going to have to watch out for. And that starts with quarterback Brendan Sorsby. To me, this is an NFL guy. And you might be saying, Ralph, what do you know about, whether somebody has NFL potential or not? You're not a scout. I actually have a decent track record on quarterbacks. I don't brag on myself very often. I have a pretty good track record when it comes to quarterbacks. I have the receipts to prove it. Back in 2016, I pinned Josh Allen as the next Aaron Rodgers. Didn't know that Allen was going to, run for 50 touchdowns in his NFL career. But when he was early on at Wyoming, I knew that this was going to be an NFL star. And then if you followed me for any length of time, you know that I drove the Brock Purdy bus for years, especially when it came to Arizona State not recruiting him. And so, I'm not terrible when it comes to the quarterback thing. I did give Arizona State fans a heads up that you have a walk-on your roster who can throw a little bit in Trenton Bourguet. Nothing that he's accomplished when he's had the reins has surprised me at all. Brendan Sorsby is very good. Size, arm, poise, ability to run, touch, leadership. He has it all. And the fact that, he didn't really have an opportunity at Indiana and he comes to Cincinnati and breaks out like this, I don't know who saw that coming. But on the season, 66% completions, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, almost 1,800 yards passing. And he's done a really, really good job of making use of all of his receiving weapons. Xavier Henderson and Joe Royer, combined, those two have about 800 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns. They're not going to have Tony Johnson this week. That's their kind of number 3 slot guy. But Jamoy Mays, he can play. They have other options at wide receiver, and it's going to be a really interesting challenge for Arizona State. Corey Kiner, their running back, is averaging 6 yards a carry at this point, and Evan Pryor in supplemental duty is averaging 9 yards a carry. They are creating space. They are running the ball very, very well. It's a very, very talented offense. Defensively is where they face some issues, and I know they're going to come out and say, hey, we've got some good edge rushers, Eric Phillips, Jared Bartlett, Dante Corleone, the 3 of those guys combined have 10.5 sacks. And all that is true. All that is true. But at the same time, everybody that has had the ability to run on this team has. Every single team. This is a 3-3-5 defense, which you guys might remember from when Danny Gonzalez was in charge of the defense and Tony White was in charge of the defense at Arizona State. It's designed to bend but not break. And if somebody comes in and they want to run the football on you, they're going to be able to run the football. And that's what's happened to Cincinnati this year. If we're being honest, Tosin had 200 yards rushing against them. Pitt, who is primarily a passing offense, had 200 yards rushing against them. Houston did not have the ability to throw the ball and still got 4.5 yards a carry. Texas Tech, who we played against, we know they're pass first. Taj Boyd he went off. They averaged 6.5 yards a carry against Cincinnati, rushed for 231 yards. And then UCF got 200 yards rushing against them. If you do not get 200 yards rushing against Cincinnati, you are not trying to. This is not a very good defense. And any team that had the ability to pass against Cincinnati has been able to. Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein, first major college football game, 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. Miami of Ohio, 356 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. Texas Tech, balanced offense, 250 on 19 completions with 2 touchdowns. And then UCF with a 17-year-old and KJ Jefferson, who doesn't really throw. Even they get 200 yards passing and a touchdown. So Arizona State's going to be able to move the ball, theoretically, but can Jeff Sims do it? Can they present a balanced offense? Now, they're not going to have a balanced offense. That is objectively true. I know this because up to this point, Arizona State has a 63% to 37% run pass split. They are running the ball 63% of the time. That is absurd. And that is factoring in that they did have a game where they passed more than they ran because they got down 14-0 to Texas Tech. Ideally, Arizona State is shooting for a 2/3, 1/3 split as far as running the ball. And I am all for that. I'm about 80-20, 90-10 if you want to against Cincinnati this weekend. Cam Skattebo might feast this weekend. Anybody might feast. You might see DeCarlos Brooks go off. So, I think Arizona State needs to stay very dedicated to the run game. Cincinnati is a dangerous offense, but the strength of your team has been defense and running game. To quote Herm Edwards, yuck, defense and run game travels well. And so to rely on that, to not make too many early mistakes and to not have spent too much of this week celebrating is really going to be, to me, Arizona State's key to victory. And I think that they can pull it off. Why not? You're looking at a team that is not that good defensively. You're looking at an away situation where your body clock's going to be at 9 a.m. That's tough. But the crowd's not going to be overwhelming. You're probably talking about 39,000 fans in favor of Cincinnati. They're going to be lively. They're going to be excited. But if you can take them out of that game with the running game early on, you just have a bunch of bored fans sitting around in the daytime. You can take advantage of that. So, what is Jeff Sims going to be able to do? Career, he's kind of 1-to-1 ratio on the passing touchdowns, interceptions. He does fumble a little bit. I really hope he protects the ball, and I hope that he has all of the resources he needs to succeed, but a short leash if he does not. That doesn't mean that I'm not rooting for Jeff Sims to succeed. It just means that at this point in the season, you have gone from plucky underdog to opportunity to do something special. We have an opportunity to do something special. You should do whatever it takes to give you the best opportunity to win. I personally believe Trenton Bourguet is the best passer on the roster by a mile. And if Arizona State is put into a situation where they have to make use of him, then I think that opens things up for the running game even more, even if that doesn't come from the quarterback position, which we have to acknowledge has been what has afforded Arizona State so much success early on in the season. The quarterback being able to move the chains with his legs. It's taken pressure off the offensive line. But the problem is the receivers have not been as involved as you would like them to be outside of Jordan Tyson and some big plays by Xavier Guillory. I'm hoping a third receiver steps up, and makes some plays this weekend, whether that be Jake Smith or Stovall, whoever it is. Would love to see some receivers get more involved against Cincinnati. And then if you're watching this game, you at this point, you realize Arizona State's gotten down a couple of times. They've had a couple of rough starts. Don't despair. They got down 21-7 to Texas State. They won that game. They got down 2 scores to Utah. They won that game. They got down 2 scores to Texas Tech. They had every ability to get back into that game at the end. So yeah, I'm very positive going into this. I will give my prediction at the end. But next, we're going to jump into our Todd of the Week. All right, so if this is your first time listening to the Fork Cast, welcome. Todd of the Week is an award we give out every single week. It's a shout out to former Arizona State coach Todd Graham, who not only was the head coach of the football team, but donated $1 million of his salary back to the program, and they had him out for like 200 plus speaking engagements to try to raise funds for this program. So what it's about is going above and beyond for Sun Devil athletics, perhaps even to your own detriment. And so this week's Todd of the Week is kind of a surprise. It's going to a Canadian. It's going to an Arizona State hero for something that he did in college against University of Arizona. It's none other than Steve Nash. NBA Hall of Famer, 2-time MVP Steve Nash actually came and spoke to the team on Monday. And we have some audio from Kenny Dillingham as to why Steve Nash came and visited Arizona State.
Nash spoke to the team this morning. I wanted a guy just to come speak to the team, listening to me all the time gets monotonous. So come talk to somebody else just about leadership, the process. I think he was a process guy. Like I really remember him, his pregame shoot-arounds, and he kind of talked to our guys about the pregame shoot-arounds, and then him going to the bench and putting the heat pack on his back. Like I remember the things that he did in his process to be able to play at the level he did for so long. And I think it was important for our guys. He was local. I mean, we talk about activating the Valley. I mean, that's one of the legends of the Valley to come back, speak to your guys just about his process, what it takes to be successful. And then our guys got to ask him some questions. And I think our guys were fired up. He made a shot, when he entered the room. So that was pretty cool because we have a basketball hoop in there. Shocking, right? That he made it. But no, it was. I think it was good for our guys. It also just, in my opinion, humbles you. Oh, you're feeling good about yourself. Oh, look at all these people tweeting about me. And then like, oh yeah, there's 2-time MVP walked in. Who am I? Yeah, humble yourself. Let's get back to work, boys. Because you got a long way to go. Because success is relative, and even though you think you're successful right now, you're not even a pimple compared to what some people's success is. So you better re-humble yourself and get back to work.
So, I mean, how crazy is that? Arizona State has every reason to feel really, really good about themselves right now. They're 5-1. The Vegas total was 4.5 games. Kenny Dillingham said this week, if you hit that over, reinvest that money into Arizona State's NIL, which I thought was just fantastic. Being hyper aware of the fact that the people who bet on this team, who trusted this team, now have the ability to actually put their faith monetarily into this roster moving forward. But you have somebody come in who says it's all about the work over the results. And, it really fits in with the message that Kenny Dillingham has preached about, watering bamboo. You don't see what's going on underneath and the roots, and then all of a sudden it shoots up, and that's the evidence of success. And so, I feel like there's some real consistency with the message that Kenny Dillingham is laid forth. To have the ability to get Steve Nash in the room is very cool. I remember being a student at Arizona State, sitting in the student section during a football game, and Steve Nash coming and sitting with my group. And I have probably the blurriest selfie of all time with that man. But it's really, really cool to see Steve Nash back around, investing in athletes, and potentially putting Arizona State in a position to do the things they need to do to knock off University of Arizona, something he got to do as a 15 seed at Santa Clara. So congratulations to Steve Nash. I'm sure this will go up there with your 2 MVP awards, but you are this week's Todd of the Week. All right, let's get into Sun Devil signs before I give you my prediction for Saturday's game. Pretty simple on this one. This is just signs that you would bring into Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati that are a little bit fun. Wouldn't get you kicked out of the stadium or anything. Wouldn't necessarily be insulting to anybody, but just things that I think are funny. And they've been all over the map thus far this year. We'll start off with our number 5 Sun Devil sign. Remember Emory Jones. Doesn't even have to have a question mark at the end. But we had a brief period of time with Emory Jones as our starting quarterback, as did University of Cincinnati. That is our common thread. And I think both fan bases left rather unimpressed with what he brought to the table. I wish him nothing but the absolute best. But I think that the point of the sign would be that this is somebody who both fan bases may ultimately forget ever played for their team. So sign number 5, remember Emory Jones. All right, the number 4 Sun Devil sign, run behind Taft. Run behind Taft. This one's a little dumb, but William Howard Taft, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, former President of the United States, and Cincinnati's favorite son, stood at a sturdy 5'11", 340 pounds, which if he was on this Cincinnati roster would make him the heaviest player by about 10 pounds. And if you have the ability to have a little picture of him filling out a Bearcat uniform, I'm sure that would certainly add to one of the better Sun Devil signs. Run behind Taft. All right, on to number 3. One of the more notable University of Cincinnati alumnus is Chris Collinsworth, which, he's worked with Al Michaels a lot. Al Michaels went to Arizona State, so that's kind of the common thread. But the signature phrase for Chris Collinsworth, I don't know if he ever intended it to be this way, is now here's a guy. And so I think the number 3 Sun Devil sign is just now here's a guy with a big picture of Cam Skattebo, to borrow a phrase from one of the more famous alumnus and to point to the guy who will be responsible if Arizona State gets a win over Cincinnati. Sun Devil sign number 3, now here's a guy and a picture of Cam Skattebo. On to number 2. It's called a binturong. It's called a binturong. That's my Sun Devil sign number 2. A bearcat is not a real thing. It's not real. It's called a binturong. A binturong. It does not live in the United States. Now, a Sun Devil, I get it. But even the translation, the scientific name for the binturong translates to bear weasel. They are the bear weasels. Down with the bear weasels would also be an acceptable Sun Devil sign. And on to our number 1 Sun Devil sign for this week, headed to Nippert Stadium. Get ready for a good licking. Now, that's weird, admittedly. However, Cincinnati, little geography lesson, the Licking River, with Cincinnati being right on the border of Ohio and Kentucky, the Licking River goes right into downtown Cincinnati. Cincinnati is located on the Ohio River where it intersects with the Licking River. So I know, very, very strange. You probably get some looks, but our number 1 Sun Devil sign for this week, because I believe we will win, is get ready for a good licking. And now on to my prediction for this game. I talked to Brad Denny, Speak of the Devils, a little mini segment that they did this week. You got to be really, really careful with Jeff Sims as your quarterback. If things are going great, you ride the hot hand. If they're not, you got to know when to pull the plug. Jeff Sims is somebody who has 8 multi-interception games. 3 of those did come in his first 3 starts back in 2020. His first ever start was actually against Kenny Dillingham, who was offensive coordinator of Florida State at the time. He does have 3 300-yard passing games, but most importantly, he has 10 games of 60-plus yards rushing, and that's what you're going to want to see from him. So, Jeff Sims, if he turns the ball over 1 time or less and rushes for more than 60 yards, we are going to see a 31-20 Arizona State win over Cincinnati. That is my pick for this week. And this has been the Fork Cast headed into the Cincinnati week. Arizona State at the end of this could be bowl eligible. And if not, we got 5 more chances to get it done. It feels really good to be a Sun Devil fan right now. Shout out to Cam Skattebo. Shout out to Steve Nash, our Todd of the week. And thank you to everybody who listens to the Forkcast on the 1012 Podcast Network. Don't forget to support our sponsor, Charlie Hustle. Use the code 10TEN1215 for 15% off all collegiate gear. And yeah, this has been Ralph Amsden. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.